Truth in History with Charles A. Jennings.
Welcome to Truth in History. In the light of what's taking place in the world today, especially in the Middle East, with the conflict between the State of Israel and the Hamas, I would like to make some comments concerning the root of the problem. What is the root of the problem that there are so much fighting factions over there? First of all, it is a convoluted, complicated situation. There are many factors involved. And who can sort it all out except someone that is there, lived through it, or living through it, and knows all the details that has taken place presently and in the past. But I would like to ask some questions that may answer or give a clue as to what is happening in the Middle East. Who are the Jews? Are they true Israel? And do they have a right, a legal right to that land called Palestine? And have the Arabs been there for how long? How long have the Arabs people been there? And do they have a right to that land? And what is the history of Zionism? Now, what I say is going to be just an overview because there are so many details to sort through concerning the history of Palestine that it would be impossible to sort it all out in 2 or 3 hours. But as we go along, I want to consider some things possibly that have not been mentioned on the news. Now, the news media and the Schofield people and the Larkin people and the John Nelson Darby prophecy, quote, experts, they're all on the side of just one warring faction, and that is Israel. First of all, we must consider the Balfour Declaration. We can go back a little further than that because what we see in Israel today is a result of what we call the Zionist movement. And I understand that in the 1860s, that a lot of Jewish people, mainly the rabbis and the leadership, they had the idea that they wanted to go back to Palestine, what they call go back to Palestine, and build a homeland for the Jewish people. And that led up to the Zionist Conference of 1897 in Basel, Switzerland, and their leader was Theodor Herzl. And in that meeting in 1897, they decided that somehow, some way, the Jewish people would, quote, go back to their homeland that they feel that was promised to them through Abraham. And I put go back in quotes because if you were never there, if your ancestors were never there, then how can you go back? But the Balfour Declaration of 1917 took place on November the 2nd. Now, it was Sir Arthur Balfour. He was the Foreign Secretary of Great Britain. And he wrote a letter to Lord Walter Rothschild. And because Rothschild was the British Zion Federation representative, and he wrote a letter to Rothschild, and he said that we are giving our permission. The government of Great Britain is giving permission to the Jews and to the British Zion Federation to form a homeland. They didn't say nation, but they said a homeland for the Jewish people. But the latter part of that declaration, of the Balfour Declaration, stated that this declaration by no means gives the Jewish people the right to infringe on the religious and civil rights of the non-Jewish people that were presently living in Palestine. In other words, this declaration offered protection of the civil rights and the religious rights of the Palestinians that were living in Palestine at the time. Now, in 1948, well, let me back up. So when the British government gave the Jews the right to Palestine, so the Jewish people started going back there. The Jewish Zionist forces, federations and organizations and so forth, were organizing Jewish families to go back. And they started going back in small numbers. Then it increased and increased. And pretty soon the Arab people said, hey, what is happening here? Because the Jewish people are coming back in vast numbers, that we are going to be squeezed out of the land that we have lived on for 2,000 years. So that brought about a conflict between the Jews and the Arabs. And the Arabs began to use terroristic tactics against the Jewish people. Some of the Jewish people were killed. This was early on, 1920s. So the British government and the Zionists said, well, let's slow down the migration of the Jewish people into Palestine. But when that happened, being that they were, quote, losing numbers coming into Palestine, then there were Jewish terrorist organizations that formed. And it was the Irgun, U-R-G-U-N, Irgun, terrorists that began to terrorize the Arabs, to kill the Arabs. And Menachem Begin, who later became prime minister of the nation of Israel, was one of the leaders. And this lasted through the 20s, the 30s, and into the 1940s. This terrorism, and there were more than one terrorist Jewish group. And during this time, Britain had a mandate that they were to control the Palestine. It was under their domination. And after the Balfour Declaration was written, 5 nations, the United Kingdom, the United States, Japan, France, and Italy, gave Britain what we call the British Mandate over Palestine to control them. And see, Britain wanted the Ottoman Empire out of there. So in I think it was October 1918, if I'm not mistaken, is when what was his name? General Edmund Allenby of the British Army moved in, and the opposing forces laid down their arms. Not a shot was fired, and the British took over. Well, that was, not long after the Balfour Declaration. So the British were in charge. So the Jewish element wanted to take over the land of Palestine, and they wanted the British to get out, because the British were more or less protecting the rights of the Arabs and the Jews. So men like Menachem Begin and some of the other men that became leaders of the nation of Israel later on, they wanted the British out so they could do whatever they wanted to do. So they killed, maimed, murdered thousands and thousands of Arabs. So when we come to 1948, May 14, 1948, when the nation was formed, there was a previous war immediately before that, and 700,000 Arabs were displaced. Think of that. 700,000 were displaced, besides those that were murdered or injured. And hundreds of villages were destroyed. Hundreds of villages were destroyed. And a minimum of 15,000 were killed. So this is an old story going back 100 years. So you can understand the anger of the Arab people. But I've been watching the news concerning this present conflict that's going on, and every politician is on the side of Israeli. Every one of them, except the four representatives in Congress, those four women that are Arab of some sort, they came out in favor of the Palestinians. But Biden and his administration, governors, Republican, Democrat, those running for the nomination for the Republican Party, they're all on the side of Israeli and never mention with any sort of sympathy the suffering of the Arab people. Now, I'm not defending Hamas. No way can I defend terrorism on either side. And Hamas should have realized that they're going to get the short end of the stick, because here comes the United States to offer powerful military equipment and tactics against Hamas, which makes a more serious situation for all of the Palestinians in the Gaza area. They should have realized that. They cannot win militarily against Israel or Israeli, because the United States has built that Iron Dome or furnished the equipment for the Iron Dome. And also, the nation of Israel is armed to the teeth, even with nuclear weapons. And the Hamas organization is fighting with a lot less tactical, sophisticated equipment. And a lot of the Arab people are fighting with just sticks and stones. So there's two sides to every story. They're angry because they have been pushed out of their homeland, and they have existed there and lived there for hundreds of years. And the Jewish people in 1917, when the Balfour Declaration was written, the Jewish population of Palestine was only 8%. And the Arab and Christian population was 92% of the people. 92%. Now, the Palestinians are pushed into a restricted area on the West Bank and in Gaza, which they say is 5 miles wide and 25 miles long, and you've got approximately 2 million people living in that crowded conditions. Now, during this conflict, the Israeli government cuts off water, food, fuel, and electricity. That's what we call total war against non-combatants. Total war against non-combatants. But we realize that the combatants are mingled in with the non-combatants. That's their reasoning for cutting off those supplies. But for decades, a lot of if you do the research, a lot of the Arab people could not go through the checkpoints to go to work. They have been denied civil rights and food and water, etc., from time to time as these conflicts flare up. So there's the human aspect. They are people. So we must understand that there is a human element to this. Because if you look at the amount of land that the Arabs had in 1940, during the 1940s, and then the influx of Jewish immigration, they lost their land little by little by little. They populated practically all the land. Now they're squeezed into these two small areas, the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Well, in order to be honest, we must take in the history of these people. Now, the Jews have claimed that land, but can they truthfully say that that land is theirs? I'm opening a book right here, and the title of this book is The Zionist Connection by Alfred M. Lilienthal. It's a book of approximately 872 pages. And it was copyrighted several years ago, copyrighted in 1978. And no doubt Mr. Lilienthal is passed on by now. But he was a Jewish scholar, and he wrote this concerning the history of Palestine and all the political intrigue and machinations that took place in order to form the nation of Israel. And this is what he said on page 728. Quote, "Most Jews and even their remotest ancestors could not trace their way back to the land of Canaan." Unquote. So, do the people that are going back there, are going there, and say that they are going back, do they have a right to go there? Were their ancestors really there? Because Mr. Arthur Kessler, who wrote the book 13th Tribe, said that most European Jews, and that would include the Americans, have no ancestral connection with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob whatsoever. They are Khazars. Their ancestry is Khazaria. But yet and still, the Christian church does not look into these historical facts. They have just jumped on the bandwagon that everybody that calls himself a Jew has an unbroken genealogical line going all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And folks, that is not true. But the Israeli lobby in this country has convinced practically every politician and every evangelical, narrow-minded preacher and professor that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. It's what we call the chosen people myth. And also the Holy Land myth. And the Jewish lobby in this country, I wish you would just simply go to the internet, go to YouTube, and look at the many presentations that people have given concerning the power of the Jewish lobby in the United States. They own our Congress. Absolutely lock, stock, and barrel. Both parties. And here's a statement that's recorded in this book entitled The Zionist Connection on page 273. And I want to read this short paragraph. Quote, "Fear of pressure and actual pressure also play a vital role. As James McCartney, Foreign and Security Affairs Specialist of the Knight newspaper chain in Washington, explained it, I don't think any chief editorial writer for a paper in Philadelphia or Detroit goes for many months without a visit from someone representing the Jewish community and with a pro-Israel view, or a luncheon or something of that sort. Neither the Arabs nor their friends have begun to enter this arena," unquote. That arena he was talking about was the lobbying arena. and with its powerful influence. So we see that on page 273. Also, we see this statement. Do you remember the ABC News commentator Peter Jennings that died several years ago, not long after the year 2000? He passed away. This is what he said, quote, "There is definitely an anti-Arab bias in America, and I regret it," unquote. He knew it. No doubt he was a victim of it. So let's be fair, folks. I don't endorse terrorism or violence of any kind. I don't care who carries it out. We cannot endorse that. But in the book of Ezekiel, chapter number 11, I want to read you a verse that is very seldom read. And verse number 14 and 15. Again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, thy brethren, even thy brethren. He's talking, the Lord is speaking to Ezekiel. Son of man, thy brethren, even thy brethren, the men of thy kindred, that's Israelites, and all the house of Israel holy, are they unto whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem have said. And this is what they said. Get you far from the Lord, unto us this land. Unto us is this land given in possession. So that meant there was a foreign element that were saying to the Israelites, Ezekiel's brethren, get out of here. You don't belong in Jerusalem. We own it. We claim it. And that's the element that is claiming Jerusalem and Palestine today. A foreign element. Because the Jews are not the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They have been mixed with Ishmaelite, Canaanite, Edomite, plus a lot of them are just simply Khazars. And so we see the nature of these people. Now, a good brother over in Jonesboro, Tennessee, wrote me a letter recently and said, look this up on YouTube. So I looked it up, and I want to pass it on to you. It's called Mock, M-O-C-K, Child Sacrifice to Moloch. Mock child sacrifice to Moloch. It was the Jewish exhibit in the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. It's shocking. They have a woman taking a baby, possibly a doll. We don't know, we can't tell. And the stomach of Moloch opens up while smoke is coming out of his nostrils. And she places this in the bosom of Moloch. It's only 1 minute long, but it's very telling. That was the Jewish exhibit. How shocking. The Jewish exhibit. Were they promoting child sacrifice and abortion? Were they putting this agenda over to the American people in 1933 at the Chicago World's Fair? Well, who is promoting abortion today? That's nothing but child sacrifice to Moloch. In the book of Revelation, the book of end times, and we see this. This is in our Bible. And these are the words of the Lord Jesus recorded by the Apostle John in Revelation chapter 2. He is speaking unto the church of Smyrna. Verse 8, unto the angel or the pastor of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not. See, which say they are Judeans and are not. But who are they? But are of the synagogue of Satan. And that mock child sacrifice to Moloch is part of the nature of the synagogue of Satan. I know the blasphemy of them which are posing as Judahites, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Because the Edomite connection, check your Jewish encyclopedia, where John Hyrcanus, a Jewish zealot, warrior, general, goes over to Edom, which was east of the Jordan River, down south of Jerusalem, and he forces the Edomites, in 120 BC, he forces the Edomites to become Jews and the men to be circumcised. And Herod, when he was on the throne, when Jesus was born, was an Edomite by blood, but Jewish by religion. And Judaism, every Jewish scholar will tell you that Judaism was not the religion of the Hebrew people or the Israelites. Judaism never existed during the Hebrew Israelite era. Judaism came out of Babylon. It came out of Babylon. And the mixed crowd came out of Babylon, and a lot of other things. The synagogue came out of Babylon. So, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 7, the Lord is speaking to the church at Philadelphia. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth and no man shuts, and no man opens. I know thy works, Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Judeans, or Judahites, of the tribe of Judah, and are not, but do lie. That's the secret of the serpent's success, is lying. It's lying. That's the secret of the serpent's success in Genesis chapter 3. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet. So he is definitely making a distinction between the church and these false Judahites. Because he said, I will make them, the false Judahites, come and worship before thy feet, church at Philadelphia, and to know that I have loved thee, the church at Philadelphia, and the church at large. What else can we say? So do those people that are ruling the nation of Israel have a biblical right to be there? Do they have a biblical right to be there and to impose on the existing population? Now you see the reaction of Hamas and the other Arab people, because that was their land for 2,000 years. And then all of a sudden, through a written mandate in 1917, and then with the political force of the United States, when Harry S. Truman recognized the state of Israel, I think it was something like 11 minutes after they declared their constitution and their nation. He said, yes, I agree. He had influence in the White House. So, ever since then, the United States has given the nation of Israel, or Israeli, $360 billion, with a B, $360 billion since 1948. And we give them approximately $3.5 billion every year, plus military equipment, plus going over there like we're doing with 2,000 troops ready for something, for some kind of action. Don't you think the ground is unfair? But yet these politicians, they're lackeys, nothing but lackeys, lying lackeys for a foreign nation. I want to end this by saying, Jesus Christ knows the truth, and he spoke the truth to the church at Smyrna and the church at Philadelphia. And Jesus Christ is coming back, according to the Apostle Paul, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I end with saying this: Jesus Christ And Christ alone is our Savior, not some foreign nation or our own military strength. Jesus Christ will preserve true Israel. Jesus Christ is our Savior. He's our prophet. He is our high priest, Melchizedek priest, and He is our coming King. God bless you.